the numbers joining us have slowed a little, so we'll get underway, and any latecomers will just catch up. And again, if you can't see these slides in front of you somewhere, have a scroll through. Hopefully you can. Someone just shout out to us if you can't, but we'll move ahead assuming you can.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us over your lunch break. Hopefully you're joining us with a sandwich or a cup of tea or coffee. Just ask a little bit of housekeeping. If you could just check that you're on mute, please. And we have got the built in some time at the end. We'll have 15-20 minutes for Q&A. So if you do have any questions as we're going through the slides, just please pop those into the chat, and then we'll be able to address those towards the end. So good afternoon. I'm Craig Malcolm, one of the co-founders at Cultivate. I head up our executive services division, working on all roles across the senior leadership spectrum. Got over 20 years. I used to struggle when I only had 2 or 3 years experience, that I was trying to pad that out, but over 20 years recruitment experience these days, and 17 of those in the local Auckland market. And I'll hand over to Tony to introduce himself and today's topic.
Right, well, firstly, thanks everyone for joining, as Craig said, and good on you for investing some time in what's such an important topic. I think it's very easy to find excuses for not investing in your future and goals and where you're going in your career. And of course, it's a very important document that helps get you there. So well done on the investment. Like Craig, I think I've just ticked over 20 years in the industry as well. Worked across here and number of markets within Asia. Across that 20 years, jeepers, I've recruited all sorts of roles, from heads of customer experience, CIOs, CFOs, CCOs, general managers, divisional managers, country managers, you name it. So the reason for putting this together was, if you don't know already, we're coming out of, apparently, according to the economists, what is the worst recession since 1991, non-COVID related, of course, but we forget about COVID. It is a pretty tough market out there. And so this document, the CV, in our view, is one of the most important professional documents you'll ever write. But just now, given the market as it is, and apparently we are coming out of this recession, according to the economists, so we're not seeing a lot of green shoots yet, but they are, I believe, just around the corner. We're dealing with a situation when it comes to executive roles where it's been pretty congested market over the last year, 18 months. To give you an idea, just as a couple of examples, the last COO role I recruited late last year, early this year, 330 people had expressed an interest in that role. Ran a CIO role mid last year, 480 people expressed an interest in that role. And that's pretty common, I think, somewhere between at least 200 applications. So it's a busy old congested market, especially at the senior end. We're not used to that. I say we, all of us on this call. So you have a greater need than ever before to stand out amongst others and give us a reason to pick up the phone and continue the conversation. So what do we want to cover today? We really just want to drill in on this document, the CV. We want to just talk you through its importance and its role. And then more importantly, we'll dive into what we think are some practical ways to enhance your CV. And we've actually got a whole bunch of examples to give you, because we can tell you what we mean, but we're better off just to show you. So we'll show you some specific examples of what we think are not bad CVs, and we'll talk about what we like about them and what we don't. They are anonymous, so no one's background is going to be exposed here for all to critique. But yeah, a great CV, if you don't know the company and the person recruiting the role, is all you've got to prop up your application and put your best foot forward on paper with a brilliant CV, and you can expect a phone call or possibly next stage an interview. Get this wrong and undersell yourself, and your application's dead in the water. It's that simple. And Craig and I read every CV that we receive. But if we're honest with you, and that's what we plan to be today, we probably only take 10 or 12 seconds maximum to read each CV initially. That's all we can afford given the volume of CVs. And you've got to get our attention in that time. And look, that is the same with anyone in our industry. I will challenge them to tell you honestly otherwise. You don't have a lot of time to impress the audience. Now, if there's things that we like that stand out, then don't get me wrong, we're going to keep reading and we'll read the thing cover to cover and possibly even go further to look at research about you online, etc. But if you don't grab our attention early, you've lost. So, really simple question to start with. What is a CV? Well, what is it not? What we find a little too often is a bit of a collection of past job summaries. So mini job descriptions of this is what I was responsible for. And we also find them quite often, Craig, don't we, that we sort of feel like a CV's maybe 10 or 15 years old now or longer, and someone has gone, well, I've got a new role, so I'll just bolt that on the top and then bolt another one on the top, and away we go. It gets longer. And really, you need to think about changing the way that you present yourself on paper the further through your career you are. Now, just to be clear, I should have said up front that this webinar today is focused more on mid to senior appointments. So if you like, sort of executive level. Now, it's not to say if you're not at that level on this call, you won't get something out of it, but we have tailored it specifically to that level and the sort of CV that you need to write, which is different. The CV shouldn't be too brief or too thorough. What do we mean by that? We see a lot of the CVs from other markets, the UK in particular, where it's 2 pages, sometimes even 1 page. You're 20 years deep like us or more into your career. I don't think you can do yourself justice on 1 page, even 2 pages. What ends up happening is you miss out key details. You're too brief with explaining your value and your achievements. You undersell yourself. Or worse, you try and cram it all in and fine print and use all the margin you can, and we actually find it really hard to read. So we would rather let your CV breathe a little bit, go longer in New Zealand, 4 to 5 pages, and we'll talk a little bit more about what goes on those pages shortly. But we see CVs that are too long, 6, 7, 8 pages, and certainly too brief. Don't do you justice. We see CVs that are too technical. As you move through your career, why you're appointed next is less about your technical competence and more about your commercial capability, your leadership skills, your strategic input, etc., etc. So quite often we see CVs where I'll use a technical role like IT. You have previously, and perhaps a few years ago, been an IT manager, and your CV is leading with the types of programming software you've used or technical skills and knowledge, and that's all on the front page. Now that just screams to me a technical CV, not a leadership or executive CV. So be careful of that. And the other thing with CVs that shouldn't be is incomplete. Never leave people with questions after reading it. What did they do here for this 6 months? How come these dates don't line up? I don't understand why there's a gap here. So front foot things. And don't leave any questions. What is it? Believe it or not, it's a sales document. And I don't think enough people appreciate that. It is a polished and personal sales pitch to a future employer. It is achievement-based. I'm less interested in the minutiae of detail around what each role required you to do, and I'm more interested about how good you were at that role. And we're looking for evidence and examples and specific numbers, etc., that back that up. It's clear, it's concise, and it's relevant to the role you're applying for. One of the cardinal sins we see is a cover letter or the top of a CV that's actually pitched to a very different role. In fact, it has the role's title or the company still in that CV, and you've resynced that without realizing. And we read that thinking, oof, yeah, it's not a great look that your CV's still geared for a different role that you applied for previously. So in a nutshell, all you need to get out of the CV is for someone to go, yep, I can see why they've applied and I can see that they can do the role from the collection of the experience they've put forward. And more importantly, you're good at it. And that's the bit that's often missing. Proof and evidence that not just have you done this role or roles similar or roles that have you positioned and ready to step up, but you've been good at those roles and you've achieved something. So let's get into the detail.
So wanted to give you an overview on an ideal format and a layout for the CV. So as Tony mentioned, in the New Zealand market here, there's no rule when it comes to pages. As you mentioned, 2 pages probably a bit brief. Beyond 6, starting to get a little bit long. So somewhere in between is absolutely fine. And I think critically, in the digital age that we live in these days, having something that's visually appealing is critical. Doesn't matter whether you're on a website, reading your email, reading a CV. Your eyes are naturally attracted to well-formatted, clean, crisp, easy to digest forms of information, and that's exactly what your CV needs to look like. So there's lots of templates available online, which are absolutely fine to use, but I think the important thing is you need to make it your own. I think if we weigh up with perhaps a CV isn't making the right impression with the reader, it's a little too bland. It is a template, so it needs to have your personality that comes through. Don't use filler words, etc., repetition. It really needs to be you. It needs to speak about yourself. And it's not my CV, but I'll use a little example on all of the CCADs that we put here at Cultivate. We have a little bit about ourselves, and in my bio, I have a description around I like supporting guys in red shirts chasing around round ball around. But I think that adds a little bit of personality, because the amount of phone calls I get from candidates that ask me who's the team that's dressed in red that I support. But I think it helps make you memorable, and so a little bit of personality comes through as well. So in terms of the actual formatting of the CV, like we've got here on the screen, the layout and the bullet points are your friend here. They nice bold headings, bullet points. Absolutely, definitely need those in terms of that digestible content on there. I was actually doing a little bit of research last night in preparation for this, and found a study that in the Western world, our eyes are naturally trained to move in a capital E direction. So working down the left-hand column, and then you've got your bars of the E coming out here, which are your bullet points. That's how we read and process and understand information in the Western world. So we should be using that format for your CV. And in the world of AI, there's nothing wrong with using AI to help bring your CV to life. Don't use AI to write your CV for you, but in terms of final edits, tone, accuracy, 100%. That's your friend. So yeah, there's nothing worse. I think in terms of making an impression, we see filler words like attention to detail, and then 2 sentences or 2 lines into a CV, there's a spelling mistake. So you want to use technology where you can, just to eliminate any risk from that perspective.
Yeah, think about AI as being an editing support, not a copywriter in this case. Otherwise, it loses you. And we've got some examples of how to use AI well down the track. But a couple of things I'll just add to that before we go through the pages is some of the designs we've seen, pretty pictures and fancy sort of swirls and stuff. Like, it might look nice, but actually straightforward, bland CVs, I'd have to say, actually work pretty well. It's the words that need to speak about you. Don't get too clever and creative unless you're in the creative sector. Just keep it really clean and crisp and simple. Lots of white space. Make it really easy on the eye. We would rather scroll through an extra page and read an extra page of text than we will have to try and read block text. And just the other day, we were looking at a CV together. It just looked like a bit of a novel. I mean, someone had gone to town writing full block paragraphs and describing their roles and achievements. And you had to really get in and read the whole page to dig out what they did and what they achieved. Bullet points, sound bites, really short and sharp.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's look at the layout, Ian.
So we're going to take you through a recommendation of 5 pages, and ideally page 1, you want to be able to quickly summarize who you are, have a professional summary, which we'll talk about a little more shortly. Some competencies and achievements. Now, this is more of a summary on your first page. We don't want to miss those out from your actual roles and the achievements in the role, but right up top at front, we want to have some summaries. So not filler words either, in terms of, we'll see things like transformational leader, which is potentially a promise. We would like to see proof of that. So you can expand on that around examples of how you are a transformational leader. And then a career summary. So we want a nice, easy to read bullet point fashion of roles that you've had, companies and dates very quickly on the first page.
So just to be clear on that competency achievement summary, there's a question mark there because put it in if you've got the space, but we feel that actually you've got to be really careful with that. We see a whole lot of just bullet point words, to your point, behaviours or labels, and they don't mean anything sitting there on their own. We skim past them because anyone can write those words to say this is what I am or this is what I bring. So if you're going to put it in there, put some evidence against it. But to Craig's point, please do not move your achievements out of your work experience up only into that space, because our eye is going to go and read your work experience first. So if we missed that because we went there first before, believe it or not, reading that on the front page, you've got a problem. So it is repetition, therefore, and we have to be careful with repetition because it's all about best use of space. So we're not saying don't do it, just be very careful with that section.
We'll expand on page 2, but leading on from that introductory part of your CV, we want to see your work history and your experience. So that could, to Tony's point, that could be over the course of 2, 3, or even 4 pages. And the final page, perhaps we're getting up towards 4 or 5 pages by this point, but we'd like to see your qualifications, and again another opportunity to bring through your personality, your passions, your interests. Using I'm a Liverpool fan, if anyone was wondering who the red shirts are, but you don't have to put sports teams, but you want to bring a little bit of your personality through to create that interest to the reader.
So pretty straightforward. That's the sections of a CV. Qualifications last. If you're in your early 20s, you might put qualifications first because you don't have a lot else yet. But by the time you hit sort of my age and beyond, qualifications are less important. So let's park them on the back page. All right, work experience. As we've said already, this is the most critical part, right, Craig? Even though it starts on page 2,
yeah.
Just to peek behind the curtain here, we don't read page 1 in detail. We go straight to this first, and pretty much every recruiter will tell you the same.
Yeah. So using my example from last night around research, I think it was Nielsen did an eye tracking study on people reading CVs, and this is where the eyes go to first. What you've done, your work experience, the roles that you've held, etc. So it's absolutely critical to get this right. Starting with your job title. So if you have a job title that's unique to your organisation, or it differs from perhaps the more generic job titles, it's important to go with the generic, or at the very least a good descriptor of perhaps why or what you do if your job title is quite unique to your organisation.
Or bracket it, right? This is what I'm called internally, but then bracket it. What does the market know me as?
Yeah, I can think of some great examples in finance where if you work for very large, actually I could think of a role I had on last week, which was a head of finance role, but it was actually a head of business partnering. So I think if you were a candidate in that role already looking into the outside world, the business partnering job title would be far more effective from a recruiter or reading that CV's perspective, because I'd know what you do straight away from reading that job title. And then getting the company description right, so that you need to, being in a very senior or executive role, you make this applicable to how that relates to your role. So some of the things that we'd like to see in the company descriptor is general outline of the organisation, to perhaps turnover, headcount. If your organisation's not that well known, you want to avoid, to Tony's point, where you've only got a limited amount of time potentially to catch the reader's attention. You don't want them having to jump on Google and figure out who your organisation is and go to that company's website, read about us. Oh, okay, this person could be of interest. You want to capture all of that information right there in the description.
And this might sound obvious to some of you, but way too often we're saying the name of the company. I can't memorize every blooming company name in New Zealand, let alone globally. And we have a lot of global applications. So you've lost us. Once we have to go, oh, who are they? And you haven't given any description as to who they are. So we don't know. So therefore, the role and the context of that role doesn't really make sense to us until we know what company or industry that was in. So it's a really simple little thing. We've got a couple of examples, right, to look through. So here's two that they're made up CVs. They're based on real CVs, but they've been modified significantly. And what you'll see here is just in smaller type, because this bit doesn't need to stand out, but allows me to lean in and read it as I need. If I don't know who, in this case, Everest Home Solutions are, or Aurora Media Group. So to Craig's point, you've got your employment dates there, you've got the name of the company. Further down, you've got the role, which is in the top one, a general manager IT. And in the bottom one, we're just using an example where someone's had 3 different roles in the same organisation. That's how they've done it. And just 2 or 3 lines. So the top one, and I know this is small print, sorry, but the top one talks about what the company does and how big it is, but then goes on to talk about the technology stack that they use. Now, that's critical to the IT role. Whereas the bottom one, if you notice, this is coming out of Chief Customer Officer role. They're talking about the number of customer relationships they have. So just subtly different summaries as it relates to the role, as you've said. Really important to help us know what context or background you're coming from. Good on that, eh? Move on to the next one. All right. This is hardly ever done on a CV. And look, if there was one thing to take from this hour together today, I would actually say it's this next couple of slides. Every single leadership or executive role has a challenge or a mandate or an agenda or opportunity that sits in behind it. All right. Not every CIO role, CEO role, general manager, finance, whatever, is the same when it gets into what's required to succeed in the role. Every single one. Now, what's required to succeed could depend on the what's happening in the market, whether it's about competitors or a recessionary environment or whatever. It could be about a business going through acquisition or about to go through acquisition. It could be about a change in strategy. It could be something to do with people and talent and engagement of people. Could be something perhaps something to do with the fact that your department previously just hasn't delivered the value to the business that it was expected to. So there's a lack of trust and delivery internally. It could be something to do with customer experience, technology, capital investment, whatever. It could be lots of reasons. But putting this in really, really brings your CV to life. And it doesn't have to be long. But let us give you an example. Here's the same Everest Home Solutions you saw on the slide before. In this case, and this is an IT role, the business had long underinvested in technology. As you see, it was seen as a back office support rather than a growth enabler. At the same time, the business was shifting strategy, talks about how they're going more direct to consumer, and a rapid transformation of technology, team capability, and ways of working was critical to achieving business goals. So this person is painting me a picture of what they inherited. When they took on this role in August 2017, this was the state of play. This is so important because it really frames up or sets the scene for you then going on to telling us what you did in that role and what you achieved. So I would say 10–20% of CVs actually have this challenge inserted, but the ones that do just really jump out because the whole thing is far more punchy. Here's one more example underneath. Again, the same example as the second one you saw previously. In this case, here's somebody who was initially recruited to lead a launch of a particular product. They were then promoted to a different role. And the requirement there was to restructure marketing and product teams, enhance the executive level customer advocacy, drive consumer and revenue growth, and lift brand advocacy. The role spanned leadership across 5 different P&Ls, etc. So they've gone on to explain the role a little bit, but they've set the scene. I actually like the first one a little bit better. It's a little bit more straightforward, and it's more explaining what they inherited rather than what they were there to do. For instance, when the second one says, I was there to restructure marketing, well, you don't restructure marketing without a reason. So I'd rather understand what was causing the need to restructure the marketing team, if that makes sense. But both of them do a pretty good job, probably the first one slightly better, at explaining what you were there to do. And here's actually just a third one on this one, just because it's so important. We'll give you another one. Here's someone who started as a consultant in a business with Zenith Communications out of Hong Kong. So they actually had 3 roles there, initially as a consultant moving into 2 other permanent roles. So initially brought in by the retail chief executive to provide consultancy on consumer product propositions and strengthen the commercial and product management capability of the team. Obviously, there's some leadership changes, the roles therefore changed, and it talked about the need to simplify a number of brands and remove complexity, etc. So pretty good explanation, probably not the best I've read, but boy, it still really helps. So once you've done that and you've set the scene as to what you were there to do, now you can get into a very brief summary of what your role entailed. And I say very brief because we want to tone down this section so that we can dial up the achievements. Because to me, in reading an achievement, what you achieved in a role, it of course therefore explains what you were responsible for. If you achieved it, you were clearly responsible for. So better off to talk about benefits rather than features, if you like. So good way to look at this, and here's another example to bring it to life. Let's think about your span of control, reporting lines and key stakeholders, and something to do with scale and budget. And here's one again, Everest Home Solutions. So let's just play this through. In this case, very clear that the general manager IT was a global IT leadership role. It talked about the aspects of IT that it oversaw. So there's your span of control. It talked about who it was responsible to and who it dealt with as key stakeholders internally. And it finally finished up by talking about the size of the technology budget to give you an idea of scale of the role. Really short and sharp, 3 bullet points, just those key details. Any more that's probably not required because I kind of know what a GM IT does in terms of the detail underneath that. So now we can get into achievements. And the great thing now about writing your achievements is you can tie them back to the challenge. If this is what you inherited, or this is what you were here to do as your remit or challenge, what you achieved is really easy to explain back. So I read the challenge and I go to your achievements and go, oh, I can see why that's an important achievement because you were trying to sort that out in terms of why you were there in the first place. So that, again, makes the entire experience part tie together really nicely. And look, it doesn't matter what role you're in, there's always some solid achievements to bring. It's about showing leadership. It's about showing innovative thinking. It's about showing commitment, whatever. It's a showing that you made a difference in this role. You weren't just there turning the wheel. And if you're still struggling for achievements, something I've seen even at a senior level, which I think is brilliant, is put a small testimonial or quote from some feedback you've had. It could be a member of the board, it could be a chief executive, it could be another stakeholder who's commented on a particular project or a particular result in writing, or they've done something on LinkedIn for you as an endorsement, and you take a section of that and drop it down underneath the achievements as a quote. And you can even hyperlink that through. So by clicking on that, I can actually go to your LinkedIn profile and read the entire recommendation. That's really powerful. So I recommend thinking about that. as well. So with that in mind, let's just play this all the way through. So here's Aurora Media Group again. You can see all the way through from who the company is, what the roles were, what the challenges were, what the responsibilities were, and what the key achievements were as a result. Now, it's small print, don't expect you to read it all. Hopefully just gives you a sense of how this is structured and playing out. Now, I know what you're thinking. This Aurora Media Group example, jeepers, Tony, you're only giving us 5 pages to work to, but this is the thick end of a page just for one role. True, but it is the last 5 years, and that's where you really want to play up what you've done and what you've achieved, because that's the most important thing typically. And clearly, the further back you go in your experience thereafter, the shorter this is going to get as a summary, until you get to a point where the background roles that you did 2 or 3 roles back perhaps are really just listed in quite succinct short form. But this is where AI comes in, as Craig said before. So if I look on the left, it's okay, but it's probably still a little bit heavy on the eye. There's still quite a bit of text in there, especially as I look at those key achievements. So all I did is take exactly this as you see on the left, and I ran it through ChatGPT, and I said, please make this a little more punchy, 20 to 25% shorter, and therefore easier to read and get the message across without losing any detail. And this is what I came up with. So now we're down to, I think when I copied this into a Word document, so it's about 2/3 of a page. And as I said, all of the detail is still there on the right-hand version as the left. The tone and style of writing hasn't changed because I asked it not to change that. All it's done is it made it more succinct. So this is a great thing to write it out in full. You know, we use nice long sentences to explain ourselves, and then AI can help us just go, yep, right, great. Let's just get it right down to the bare essence of what we need to get across. Same thing here. Here's Everest Home Solutions, an example used before on the left. Not bad, but you can see those value created was the title used here instead of achievements. That's fine. Quite wordy. Run it through AI. A little bit tighter, a little bit shorter, a little bit more white space as a result. Haven't asked it to write it because I want to bring my personality and style and explain myself. And crikey, AI doesn't know what I achieved in these roles. I do, but it can certainly help me get the point across faster. So let's move to professional summary. So we're jumping around. Professional summary was first in the CV, but the reason why we're not talking about it first is because it's the second most important thing, not the first, even though it's at the top, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So to Tony's point, once we've, I guess, validated that your skills and experience could be a fit for the role, would then naturally move on to learning a little bit more about you in terms of your motivations, some of the broader skills and experience that you could bring to a role. And to Tony's point, it's an opportunity to add some personality into here as well, and also it's a chance to, if there's been a change in responsibilities over time, or you're stepping down, you're stepping away across into a different area of an organisation. This is your chance to explain that, as Tony mentioned earlier. You don't want the reader to be scratching their head or have any questions around why is there gaps, or why is this person applying for this role. I can't see, based on job titles, etc., I can't see why they're applying. This is the opportunity just to add a little bit in there around motivation for the particular role that you're applying for, and front foot any changes or any sideways movements, etc. So we've got some examples to show you in terms of what good professional summaries look like.
Although this one's probably okay.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say this one stands out, but it's just an example.
We're probably running an order from okay to pretty decent by the third. We've got 3 here. So this one's quite good in length. You don't want them to take up 3/4 of a page, but probably a little too corporate, little sterile, if we compare it to some of the others here.
There's a really interesting thing that people do in their CV here that a lot of us fall into the trap of. We try and get too clever with explaining ourselves. We try and use words that we wouldn't normally use in everyday to sort of elevate ourselves and sound even more impressive, and they end up coming out sounding all quite vanilla. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like the same summary I read 2 CVs ago. The number of CVs that start, I'm a highly experienced senior executive, transformational leader. And you think, oh God, I've read transformational leader at the start of every sentence for the last 5 CVs. I don't know what that means. And I don't know if everyone wants to be transformed. Just be a little bit more human and a little bit more simplistic or straightforward in the language you use. It really, really helps. Try not to turn this into a bunch of corporate sort of cliches or platitudes. It's so easy to do, and we know what we mean, but then Craig and I read it and go, gosh, sounds like the last one.
Yeah, or even worse, it sounds like Chat GPT wrote that for me. It's quite, we were chatting yesterday when we receive cover letters. You can absolutely, well, for now anyway, you can tell the ones that have been run through AI, and
well, they're just bland, right? Yeah, correct. Yeah. So here's one that's a little bit better.
Yeah, this one injects a bit more personality around there. There's a lot of who I am, where I'm going, where, my dream role in there. It helps give a sense of who you are, what's important to you, and like I say, where you're wanting to go. And this person goes on to talk about the sorts of people that they'd like to work with and the sorts of environments that they feel that they would work well in. But starting to bring a bit more personality through, and quite clear in the sense around what they've done and what they're looking for.
So to be clear, as we said on the left there, it's a summary of your value, right? It doesn't need to be an executive summary in the sense it sums up your entire CV. We'll read that later. All we want to know is who you are, what you bring, and where you're taking it. So I really love seeing a little bit of self-awareness through this. And by that, I mean someone who can sum up who they are as a leader, as a professional. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what interests and excites me. This is my happy place, whatever that is. I love to see, because, self-awareness is not that common. And even better, this is where I'm taking it next. Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't know where I'm taking it next because it kind of depends on the role I'm applying for. True. So you may not list a role title, I'm going to move into this role next. But in this case, you see, I want to work alongside forward thinkers who are prepared to disrupt and using innovative technologies. So he's just talking about the context, the people, the environment, the agenda that he wants to move with, rather than pigeonhole himself into a role. And I think here's our third one, which probably not perfect, but I really like. This isn't obviously me. I just put my name on it.
Yeah. Tony's clearly not French.
No.
But if you've got the time just to scan through that, we've talked a lot around, I think from a formatting point of view, really nice, but we've talked a lot around personality and bringing yourself to life in terms of what's important to you. To Tony's point, what you bring, where you're going. We think this candidate does a really nice job of doing that, whilst giving us a sense of him. Putting rugby head, those sorts of things in there, I feel is nice to see what he likes to get up to outside of work. And I think where he really hits the mark is the purpose around there, around where he's wanting to go. He's a really passionate guy about New Zealand. This is a real candidate who's only worked for New Zealand organisations, and I think when you read this professional summary, you get his the essence of who he is and why he's wanting to work for those sorts of organisations. And I think in very simplistic terms, that is the purpose of your professional summary. You can, as the reader of the CV, you can quickly determine, okay, I can see why he or she has applied for this role. It's blindingly obvious from this professional summary, and that's what you're trying to achieve with this.
Interests, passions, what you do outside of work, who you are. We're not going to read this first either, but we will go there if we like the rest of it, right? because we know a little bit about you now. We've determined you can do the job. You've done something similar enough to understand why you've applied. We've read a little bit about your summary now to sort of tie it all together and work out what you're about professionally and what you bring. And then we'll go hunting for other information, like what you do outside of work. And it starts to give us a sense of the values, the person, how you describe yourself outside of work. Again, a little bit of personality. I've seen a little bit of humour come in here. Craig and I both love cycling. So saw a friend CV the other day. He said in his interest he had bike riding, something else, cycling, something else, riding my bike. Have I mentioned cycling? Yeah, it was just a bit of fun. Just again, bring a bit of personality in. And then I think let's talk about these employment gaps if you've got any.
Yes. So Tony mentioned right up front, it's really important to front. I'm about to say nothing to be ashamed of. It's just really important to explain gaps. You don't want the reader to have to work out why there's a gap in the CV or the dates don't match up. Why basically. So put this in your CV and also list any perhaps you've been doing some charity work or pro bono work. This is a great opportunity just to insert this as well for the avoidance of doubt when it comes to gaps in the employment.
So I'll bring you a good example of this, actually. So I know there's a bunch of people as executives who, and rightfully so, want to freshen up, leave their job, take stock, and then go again into the market, find their next role. Now, in the last year, 18 months, that's been pretty hard, and there's been people that have taken longer to do than what they hoped. Now, so there's a gap on the CV, right? The last role finished 6, 9, 12 months ago, so be it. But I was talking to one person the other day. He said, you know what, my partner's in medicine, works at the hospital, so I can't look for a job 40 hours a week. So I volunteered as an intern, loved it, got out in the world, spoke to people, talked about their stories, made people feel at ease as they wheeled them around the hospital. And this was a very senior candidate. He's used to some quite big roles. But it just showed he got off his butt and went out and did something and gave back to the world. So to Craig's point, volunteering, mentoring of others, training. If you went out and did some study during this time to upskill yourself, put it all in there. Show within that employment gap what you were doing with your time. And I think that says something about your character.
Absolutely. And can't talk about CVs without addressing bias and some of our recommendations when it comes to bias. So I guess in our opinion, probably should leave photos off. I think if people want to go looking for you in more detail, they'll probably find you on a company website or LinkedIn where you'd have a photo anyway. But in terms of getting over that first hurdle in an application process, best to leave it off. Of course, there's some jobs out there where you probably would, if you're a TV presenter or a model or those sorts of roles, you probably need to have your photo on there. But I think, as generally speaking, it's best to leave your photo off. And
sorry, by the way, and simple little things like, I mean, it's obvious, right? Like, well, that person looks a bit young for this position. I've had that. Yeah. This person looks a bit old. Right? We're going to talk about ages in a second. This person looks a bit too formal. They're in a suit and tie and they're all buttoned up, and we're quite casual. So that, don't know about that. This person looks too serious. Or that photo looks a bit Facebook-like, they're holding a glass of something that looks like Chardonnay, but I'm not sure about that in a CV. So just don't let people judge you. Now, if we saw a CV and it looked okay and it was down that sort of narrow lane of kind of like it's not going to do yourself any harm, we might say leave it on there. But just for the sake of this today, if in doubt, leave it out.
Yeah. And from an ageism perspective, unfortunately, whether it's conscious or unconscious, there is ageism out there. So if you're worried about your CVs looking pretty long, or when you perhaps your high school or your university's on there with your qualifications and they're quite a long way back in the calendar, it's totally okay to leave the dates off. And to Tony's point, if we're stepping through the pages of your career summary, we want a lot of information on that second page, third page about some of your most recent roles. But once we start to go back, perhaps you're in the 8, 9, 10, 11 roles back. Nothing wrong with just grouping those. You don't have to put months and years, etc. for those ones. Yeah, and I say from schools and universities, etc., totally fine to leave the dates off if you're getting a little worried that maybe someone's not going to pick your CV up or take you to the next round. And again, if from a disclosures point of view, perhaps whether you have a disability or neurodiversity, etc., best to leave those. It's fine once you're talking and get moving your way through a process. But again, in terms of that sales document, you want somebody to ring you back. You want somebody to not have a bias or rule you out based on their own personal values or the view of the world. Better to leave that information off your CV at this point of the process as well.
Basically, if it doesn't impact your ability to do the role, don't put it on there. It's not worth it. Right, final point, and that gives us 10 minutes to do Q&A, if you've got any. Cover letter, yes or no? I have this question a lot, actually. Well, from one point of view, if the advert asks for one, there's your answer. If someone says attach your CV and cover letter, you're attaching a cover letter. Craig and I have talked at length on this. I think cover letters are dying. I think even at senior level, the relevance of a cover letter is less than before. Your CV, if well written, especially if you've got that summary or the about me up there, and it really quickly, succinctly sums up who you are and what you're about. I don't know what a cover letter adds. I've seen really long cover letters. I've seen cover letters with information in it. That's not in your CV. That's a no-no. Again, give you a peek behind the curtain here. Most of us in recruitment at any level will work with some sort of database so we can track everyone and not lose CVs. Applicant tracking systems, they've called. 9 times out of 10, that software actually brings your application up with your name, etc. I click on that name. The first document that comes up is your CV. So that cover letter you've written for me, actually, I have to go looking under your file under other documents in order to find it. It's the CV that comes up on screen first. So that's the first thing I'm going to read. If I like the CV and there's some unanswered questions or there's something else I want to learn about you, I may very well go and look for your cover letter. But when you think about that, it's all a bit round the wrong way. Quite often you expect someone to read your cover letter first, but software doesn't allow that. So don't put something in there that that's not in your CV, because that CV needs to stand alone on its own 2 legs. If you are writing a cover letter, keep it short. Now, whether that's a covering email or an actual sort of formal document or letter in an electronic form, really what you want to do is summarize what it is that excited you about this role. Where's the motivational fit here? And if there's a variety of different experiences in your background, either here or overseas, that you think come together to make you a good candidate, but that's not really obvious in the 10 or 12 seconds that I might be reading your CV, you might choose in the cover letter to just to give me a quick short paragraph as to how the accumulation of your experience aligns nicely with this role. That, if you're going to use a cover letter, was what I would recommend it for. Otherwise, I don't know. I think they're dying a slow death. Yeah. So, quick summary. It's a sales document. If it doesn't sell you in 10 seconds, we've got a problem. Simple, clear, punchy, bullet points, sound bites, lots of white space. I'd rather you spread it out a little bit than cram it in there. It's got to be easy on the eye. It's got to jump off the page or the screen. The work experience is the hero section. That's where we're going to go first. Tell us about the company. Tell us about the challenge of the role, then your responsibilities and achievements. Use that summary or profile to sum up your value, passion, and direction. This is what I bring in terms of my value. This is what I'm excited about, and this is where I'm going next. Don't leave important details for the cover letter, as we've said. Your interests showcase your personality, so I think they're cool to put in there, and go to put a little bit more detail than simply just reading. It's okay if you're a bookworm, that's great, but just reading by itself doesn't sort of tell me enough about you. Minimize opportunities for unconscious bias. All right, let's go to questions. We're going to stop sharing at this point. We've got 7 minutes left, so we're going to jump onto the Q&A section. If you haven't asked a question, now's your time. And we're going to go straight to the top of the list. Should you use the title, the challenge? Yeah, I see that the most. The challenge, or what was required, or what I inherited, or the state of the role, or something. But it does. If you don't like the challenge, use something else. But something to that effect. I think every role has a challenge. Otherwise, what are you there to do? So we like the challenge. It's quite common. Don't have to use them. Will the slides and recording be shared? Yes, they will. Yeah, we'll send you both after this. It has been recorded. And that is it in terms of Q&A. Either we've covered everything, we possibly could and more.
I think a new one's just come through.
Is it okay if I have multiple challenges? Yeah, it is. I'll probably just sum it up and maybe call it challenges. And just, again, you probably only got 2 or 3 lines here. So your job is to try and get those multiple challenges, because there could be multiple things happening at once, right? Change in executive leadership, change in business strategy, high turnover of staff, whatever. Just try and sum that up and still in a paragraph. What if I've been a contractor for a long time and got a lot of roles, but want to find a permanent one? What I like seeing in contractors' backgrounds is I like to see where you've been extended. So make sure that's clear, because if a contract has been extended, they must have been really good. And it says that you added enough value in the assignment you went in to do that they found other work for you. I really love to see where you've gone back somewhere again as a contractor. So you went back again and did more work in the same place. And I really like if previously you've actually gone permanent to a role too, because it again says that you did such a good job, they couldn't help but hire you. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of contract roles and then moving into a permanent role. Just want to be really clear about what's changed in your personal circumstances, your situation that has now caused you to want to get out of contracting into a permanent role.
Yeah,
Craig?
I was going to jump in. This is probably a good, with your personal summary, we're talking about that. Would be a good opportunity to talk around why a permanent role is your motivation right now. Again, we're saying we don't want the reader to ask questions or make assumptions thinking, oh, so-and-so's had tons of contract roles or a contractor that they're going to be interested in a permanent role. So that's your opportunity to state there why your motivations for permanent roles and where your skills and experience would line up for the role that you're applying for.
And the reason why that's important now, right, is the market's a bit quieter. If you've been in contract and you can't find a contract, you think, oh, to heck with it, I'll throw my hat in the ring for a permanent role. Oh, we've got to be careful with that, right? So I want to know that your reasons for going into permanent role are genuine and not just based on the market, because it's all about risk. What I don't want for my client to have happen is you jump into that for 3 months. It's not really where you want it to be. You still love contracting. The market comes right and off you go again.
Yeah.
So you just need to overcome that. Is AI being used as a first pass on CVs? Well, not in this office.
No.
Still Craig and I are doing it the old-fashioned way. And there's reason for that. We use AI a lot in our business, a huge amount, but we don't use it for assessing talent and CVs. We think we've got an eye for CVs and we get a sense of people, style, personalities, approach, etc. by the way in which you write your CV. There's a lot of sort of detail that comes through in a CV, and I think that requires a trained eye. I'm not comfortable yet at this point, at least for AI to be doing that. I think you'll find there's perhaps agencies that do that. You won't get that here. What's really scary in the US now is, and this is more for college graduates, but you can actually put your credit card on a website, put in how many different applications you want this bot to do for you, load up your CV and some pre-screening question answers in advance of sort of the common questions asked in the application process, and it will run off and apply on your behalf to 100 jobs, 1,000 jobs, whatever. Now that worries the heck out of me, because then we're just going to get even more congestion at application stage with a whole lot of bot-driven applications. When we get to that point, yeah, heaven help us all. But right now, we think the old-fashioned way is best. CV or resume, doesn't matter.
No. I think CV's possibly more common in New Zealand, and I know definitely in Australia, resume would be more common over there, but doesn't matter. We've got another question here. Is it okay to summarise job responsibilities for a person in the same organisation for more than 10 years, handling multiple roles? Yes, but I would break out. So when we send the slides out, I have another. I can't remember the organisation, but I think it was the media group one, where there was a company description, and then immediately below that, they've listed out all of the roles that they've held with. I think they had about 5 roles within that organisation, just bullet points of the titles, and then got into their challenge, responsibilities, and achievements. That part's okay to package up.
My view is if your multiple roles are similar in nature, so the one stacks above the other, and maybe you've just taken on more breadth of responsibility, but it's in a similar sort of function, I would actually stack those together and explain them all as one and talk about the journey within that role vertically. If your roles are quite disparate and you've moved you've moved horizontally into different functions, etc., you're probably then better to split it out and have a separate challenge, responsibilities, achievements for each of those roles if they're different.
Yeah.
It's whatever, there's no right or wrong on that. It's just whatever feels right for you in terms of use of space and getting your point across.
Yeah. Another question here around commonly used words or phrases that make us cringe and therefore to be avoided.
I mentioned one before, which is transformational leader.
Yeah.
I've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
That's probably going in the swear jar.
Yeah. I don't know so much if it's cringe, but what we talked around that bland, corporate, sterile statements without any proof points or being able to demonstrate results. Of course, I think I mentioned the attention to detail. If there's a spelling mistake in there, that's a cringy one.
I think jargon I see too much of. I see acronyms that are used in an industry, and I go, I can't remember all the different acronyms of different industries. I've read a lot of CVs now, thousands of them. I'm getting pretty good at understanding what everyone means, what they say. But I talk about the mum test. So, or whoever the relative. It's a really hard document to write, and it's really hard to get out of your own head and separate yourself to go, well, does someone else know what I'm saying here? So give it to a relative or a friend or a colleague and say, does this sum me up? Does this describe me? And do you actually know what I do for a job? If you give this to your mum and your mum goes, sorry, Craig, I still don't really know what you do for a living, then you haven't written, I think, a clear enough way. So it's not about probably words and phrases so much. It's just that we get a bit frustrated that people haven't written it for the market and written in really simple terms. Anything else we've got on there? We're right on 1 o'clock. So yes, thank you for pointing out there was more chats. I didn't load them before. So I think we've got through the bulk of them. Sorry if we haven't covered everybody. Again, appreciate your time. Hopefully this is of help. And again, good on you for investing an hour on this document. I think it's an important one. I wrote a CV for the first time 4 years ago when I was working out what I was going to do with my life before we started Cultivate. And I've read thousands of CVs. Boy, it was a hard document. I think I wrote it 6 times and ran it past people and asked for feedback and wrote it and rewrote it. And it was quite cathartic because it helped me summarize in my own head who I am and the value I bring. So bashing it out and hitting send, be careful. It's going to stay with you for a while. All right, good luck out there, and hopefully the market turns for us all this year. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend, everyone.